Hello, grade 3. We're going to read the story today. Sorry, hello, grade 4. We're going to read the story today called The Game of Silence. It's written by Louis Erdrich, illustrated by Joel Spector. Remember our central question for the week: how do traditions connect people? So our story is going to be related to traditions of the Native Americans. Glossary of Ojibwe words. Now these are American Indian words. So we have arsenic, a pile of stones. Ia, yes. Gego, stop that. I can't see that well. Makakun, containers made of birch bark. This is containers that they made from the bark of trees. Makazinan, which is footwear. It's what we call moccasins today. It's usually made out of deer skin or moose hide, and it's often trimmed with beads or fur. I think you've probably seen moccasins before. All right, let's begin. In 1859, year-old Omakayas, an Ojibwe girl, realizes her family's life near Lake Superior is about to change. After being forced off their land, her cousins, the raggedy ones, have arrived, exhausted and starving. While the adults discuss serious matters in the lodge, Omakayas and the older children in her tribe must play a game of silence. Words, 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 pressing up from her stomach, trembling on her lips. Words buzzing in her throat like caught bees, banging in her head, harsh words, angry words, sounds boiling up in her like sap, wild things she couldn't let out. Remember, she's playing the game of silence, so she's not allowed to speak. Yow! A kick from her brother almost caused Omakayas to blurt an exclamation, so she almost screamed when he kicked her underneath the table. No. Omakayas sealed her lips together in a firm line and glared at her brother with all of the force pent up inside. If the fire from her eyes could scorch him, Pinch would have been the first to yell out. Then he would lose the game of silence. But Pinch was used to receiving furious looks from his family. He knew just how to respond. First, he looked innocently at Omakayas as though he was ever innocent. He pretended he was unaware of the raging energy stuffed up inside of his sister. Then, as Omakayas bored her eyes at him with increasing intensity, he lolled out his tongue and twisted his face into a deranged and awful mask. So her intensity, she was very serious. She had a purpose. She wanted to beat him. She wanted to win this game. His features shifted into one ugly and absurd face after the next until suddenly Omakayas just about almost laughed. Just in time, she clapped her hand to her mouth, closed her eyes, concentrated. Yes, Iya, she would be a stone, arsenic, a pile of stones, each one harder and quieter than the next. She would be silent and more silent yet. And in spite of her annoying brother, she would win. She would keep her eyes closed, put her forehead on her knees. Thought stone, 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 a sin filled her mind with the sound of falling rain, which was easy. Outside, it was not just raining, but pouring down a drenching, cold, miserable early summer shower. The rain had lasted for days, since the raggedy ones arrived. That was another thing. Besides Pinch, Omakayas couldn't stand rain anymore. The weather made mush of tender new ground around her family's birch bark house. Droplets hissed through the roof vent into the fire, driving stinging smoke into her eyes. Everyone around her was affected. Nokomis's old bones ached, and she creaked like a tree every time she moved. The watery wind sent coughs racking through her mother's chest. It was too wet to play outside, and cold when it should have been warm. Worst of all, Omokeus was stuck with Pinch. So she didn't like being stuck in the house because of the rain with her brother. He nudged her. Omokeus almost slugged him in return, but controlled herself. She'd had enough of him to last her whole life. She opened her eyes a fraction. Then her eyes went wide in shock. Somehow, Pinch had got hold of her beloved doll, and he was making a teeter-totter on the cliff of his knees. Omokeus bit her lips so hard it hurt. Pinch walked her doll to the edge of his knees, then teasingly back. If only Mama was here. If only she would return. Nokomis concentrated on her work, so it was impossible to distract her. Remember, she can't say anything. She can't say anything to the Nokomis to get her attention because they're still playing the game of silence. Omokeus pretended to shut her eyes again, but cleverly watched until just the right moment to snatch back her doll. She sighed as though she was falling asleep, and then, with a flash, she grabbed. Taken by surprise, Pinch couldn't react quickly enough to hold on, and Omokeus triumphantly clutched her doll. She stuck it down the neck of her dress. There, safe inside, she laughed. But she didn't make a single sound, not a chirp, not so much as a mouse's squeak. She was going to win the game of silence. She just knew it. Pinch was now poking little twigs into the fire in the center fire pit, watching them burn. Omokeus tried not to notice him, but his head was so big and fuzzy. Pinch's hair sprang out with its own energy. Crafty eyes and his tough round face calculated his sister's endurance, her ability to stay in the game, her determination, her will that she was going to win. He was surely cooking up some mischief. Sure enough, Pinch drew the burning wand from the fire and laid it innocently next to her ankle, as though she didn't know that it would scorch her if she moved the slightest inch. He made the wood hot and he put it next to her ankle. So if she bumped into it when she moved, it would burn her and she would scream and lose the game. And make her cry out first and instantly lose the game. She kicked it back at him. Giggle Pinch, she nearly warned, but bit her lip. She almost said it, but she bit her lip to keep from saying anything. He mouthed the taunt, making an impossibly irritating face that almost broke Omokeus' discipline. He's trying to bother her. He's irritating her, trying to bother her so that she stops playing the game and she loses. Luckily, just at the second that Omokeus decided to forfeit the game and to smash her little brother over the head with the big tin soup ladle, the visitors arrived. She was willing to give up the game and she was willing to lose. She was going to forfeit so that she could hit him with the soup ladle. It was driving her crazy. They are here, said their grandmother. You can quit the game until after we eat. So she gave them permission to stop playing until after they had eaten. Oh, Omokeus exploded with such a wild sound of rage that Nokomis jumped. Pinch retreated. He backed up. He withdrew, unnerved by how sorely he tested his sister. Omokeus breathed out in relief. These visitors were her friends and cousins, Twilight, Little Bee, and Two Stripe Girl. They had brought the boy she called in her mind the angry one. Her cousins were her favorite friends, the ones she counted on. Twilight was much like her name, quiet and thoughtful. Little Bee was funny and bold. Two Stripe was tough, and she could do anything a boy could do, usually better. Since her mother had died, she was wilder than ever. Even her father had not been able to handle Two Stripe and had left her with Auntie Muskrat. But Auntie Muskrat had had no success in taming Two Stripe. Sometimes she was so fierce that she outdid everyone. It was a challenge to play with her. The girls had learned to sew and bead together, gathered berries, and helped their mothers clean fish. They also learned early on how to tan hides, a task that Omakayas despised. She hated to tan hides. When you say tan hides, it means that you take the hides and you change the color. And now, too, her sister Angeline was home. Omakayas grinned with satisfaction. Pinch was delightfully outnumbered by girls and would pout, creeping to Mama's side when she arrived and turning into a baby, hoping to be pampered with tidbits of meat and maple sugar. Now everyone, the children and their parents, squeezed into the lodge. They had made the lodge extra big that summer for visitors. For the first time, it was packed entirely full, but there was enough room for everyone. Even the angry one found a space to sit. He glared from a little spot against the wall. Together they ate rich venison soup from the shallow birch bark macacoon they brought along with them. Two other men squeezed in, important men. Old Tallow entered, huge and rangy and smelling of wolf. She settled herself while outside her ferocious dog stood guard, unmoving and alert even in the pelting rain. Each of Old Tallow's feet seemed to take up as much space as a small child. But Omakayas didn't mind. Warily but completely, she loved the fierce old woman. Each visitor brought a gift for the pile that the children who won the game of silence would choose from that night. For it was an important night. With the raggedy ones came serious doings, difficult questions, and impossible news. Great attention was needed. The grown-ups needed to counsel, think, absorb the facts without having to shush small children. The children could tell how important the meeting was from the degree to which their silence was required. The pile of treats was the best ever. So they all brought something to put in the pile that the children would take if they won the game. And these were the best prizes they had ever seen in the pile, meaning that it was really important for them to be very quiet. There was a bag of marbles, some of actual glass, not just clay, a pair of narrow moccasinin that Omakayas thought just might fit her, one doll, elaborately dressed in a tiny set of breeches and a leather coat, a sharp knife, a deer knuckle game, two duck bills of maple sugar tied together with split jack pine root, 6 red ribbons, a little roll of flowered cloth, 8 tiny bells, 1 small bow, and 6 arrows tipped with real brass points cut from a trade kettle. The arrows were fletched with the sharp black and yellow feathers of a bird that the island where they lived was named for, the golden-breasted woodpecker. Old Tallow must have brought them. What treasures! The children examined them breathlessly, each picking out one particular prize they meant to win. Little B, of course, wanted the doll. Two-Stripe Girl the bow and arrows. Pitch coveted the knife, but he was torn by greed for the maple sugar and the need for marbles to replace those he'd lost. The angry one did not deign to move from his spot or look at the gifts. No doubt he'd have no problem winning the game. As for Twilight, quiet and serene, she had no trouble playing the game and she would be content with anything. Omokeus wanted the ribbons, the bells, and the marbles too, but she settled on the moccasin because she had watched her grandmother make them so carefully. They were fancy, with velvet ankle cuffs, the tops beaded with flowers and little white sparkling vines, worth her silence. So these prizes were very nice, and the children wanted something from the pile, and they were willing to play the game and do their very best to win so that they could pick the prize they wanted. Now the grown-ups were ready to start talking. Nokomis sang the song of the game of silence 4 times, nearly catching Pinch at the end. Then she turned away from them too, absorbed in the talk. Omokeus looked longingly at Twilight, and her cousin made a sad and frustrated face. With her favorite cousin so close and her annoying brother so near, it was difficult to play. If only they could talk. At first, the girls communicated by mouthing words and moving their eyes, but the temptation to laugh was too great. They turned away from each other unwillingly. Omokeus listened to the rain, a solid drumming and hissing. Then she listened to the fire crackling and sighing. She watched the beautiful and changing glow of the coals. At some point, Omokeus couldn't tell exactly when, her attention was caught by something her father said. And then she noticed that her cousin Twilight was also listening to the grown-ups' conversation. Soon, they all couldn't help but listen. They leaned forward, straining to hear every sound, almost forgetting to breathe. That night, for the first time, everybody got their prizes. Nobody lost the game of silence. For that night they knew the threat of a much bigger loss. They would all fear to lose something huge, something so important that they never even knew they had it in the first place. Who questions the earth, the ground beneath your feet? They had always accepted it, always here, always solid. That something was home. So the children were worried when they overheard the conversation and they realized that what the adults were talking about was the fact that the settlers that were coming in were trying to take away their land. Okay. So that's our story for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you felt like you didn't understand anything or you have questions, you should reread and find your answers. If you have any questions, you can message me and I will answer you. Okay? See you later. Bye-bye.